Hello, everyone. I am very happy today to be talking to Johanne Pelletier. How are you, Johanne?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm happy to be talking to you and to have you on the show this Sunday because you were actually performing the first time I went to a storytelling show, which was
Wow.
in January 2018 in Montreal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think it was a story that night stayed with me. It was life changing because at the end of the show, the host Matt Goldberg said, "We welcome first-time storytellers all the time, and we have this workshop coming up, and we have this 2-minute story event coming up." And I was like, "Okay, this is my chance. Maybe I can do it," which I never would have imagined before. And I remember your story was about swimming competition. Does that ring a bell?
Rowing.
Rowing. Oh, okay.
Rowing. My terrible experience with rowing. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think was there something about not winning?
not winning,
Yeah,
failing
yeah.
miserably, actually, in a very dramatic, very public way. Yeah.
There you go. So I think that's actually the kind of stories that make us feel seen because they're not part of the mainstream narrative. So yeah, it was great.
Thank you.
So here we are almost 3 years later, and you're going to be on the show. So that's great. So you are in Montreal, okay, why don't I read your bio for everyone to know a
Okay.
little bit? And then we'll go from there. So you are a Montreal-based writer and storyteller. You perform your work in English and in French, which we'll talk about. By day, you work in communications and you are a sought-after storytelling coach and teacher to startup incubators and academic researchers. And in the category of most unusual side passion / expertise, you are also a certified boxing judge in Quebec, Ontario, and New York State. And so, yes, let's start with your first time telling a story on stage. Why did you do it, and how was that for you?
So the story is that I work in communications, and I was helping colleagues, academic colleagues, in creating short presentations to deliver to a general public audience. So 7, 8 minute stories that weaved in aspects of their own work, but with a personal element. So again, to appeal to a broad audience. And I started to look at storytelling shows. I was a regular listener of The Moth. And I thought, well, this is an interesting way to approach it. But I thought, well, if I'm going to help these colleagues to do this, I should really try it myself. I should see what it feels like to um, know a story really well, the way we know our research or know a topic, and find a way to curate it in an interesting way for an audience. And so I pitched the story to Confabulation in Montreal, and they accepted it and worked with me on the story, my first story. And it's actually a story I continue to tell. Indeed, I told it just recently in September, so it's a favorite story of mine. And I thought when I first broached this, I thought I would just do it once. Like I thought I would
Mm.
try it out and learn from this and just transpose what I learned to work. And I did that, but I think I just found it opened up a creative channel for me that in terms of either writing about boxing or about aging or about sport or about family things, it really gave me a place to be in a format that I really liked.
Mm.
And from that grew my life as a storyteller.
Mm.
I haven't
So,
been able to stop. Yeah,
yeah, it's pretty addictive, isn't it?
it really is. Yeah.
So when was that the first time you told a story on
This was in 2017.
stage? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so not that long ago.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you tell your stories both in English and in French. Are you primarily Anglophone?
I went to, my studies were in English, so in like all the way through. French language happened at home and with family and friends and in life in Montreal. And so I feel like my formative language is English, but there are some things that I think about and find funny or find interesting that are only in French. And I don't know that there are strict categories of those, but it's I know when things work better in English and in French.
Right. So you've told stories in French also on stage? Like
yeah, I've told I've written stories in French. I've told my first story last year in French. And it was, I think it was as terrifying as my very first story with confabulation. Even though I've always been in front of audiences in my work life and given a lot of public talks, the act of doing a story which is inherently more personal in either language, I remember thinking, oh my God, I could hear them, either Matt or Juliana doing my introduction, thinking, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? I can't believe I'm going to go do this. And I was terrified, but because it's personal. It's just it's different than any other kind of talk or discourse in front of the public. So, but as I did it, I thought it was something I'd like to continue to do and do more of, because again, there are things that I think come from an experience of living in another language that only work in that language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Or work better in that language.
Mm-hmm. I have never told any story in French in front of an audience. There aren't that many storytelling shows in French, actually. So, and I can actually absolutely understand how that would be terrifying. I can't imagine doing it, actually. Like, I think I am going to at some point, but it's so different. I think for me, English is a sort of mask in a way. It's an added layer of protection. And I think telling a story in the language that I've used for most of my life would be even more intimate.
Yeah, there is. That's interesting. There is I think there is a different kind of intimacy. And I'd related to you before the story I told in French. I'd been invited to do in English, and I actually don't think it'll work in English. And part of it is that the references I use in the story come from having lived the experience in French.
Yeah.
And I would have to rejig it and make up stuff in English that would have the same appeal to the audience. And I don't think that would be necessarily authentic. But I also didn't experience it in English.
Right.
I lived the experience in French in the way that I do in my life in Montreal, and so it made sense to tell it only in French.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and can you give an example of something that maybe a reference that wouldn't work in English, or?
So the thing I can think about in this particular story, it was a story about getting a concussion. So I actually had a concussion, not from boxing, but from an accident. And one of the consequences of the concussion was a sort of impromptu emotionality a heightened emotionality that was temporary. But as it happens, one day I was in a nail salon having a manicure and pedicure, and on the video screen came a Dalida song. So Dalida is a famous French, now deceased, but famous, infamous French singer who did a lot of American covers, but it is sort of widely known in the francophonie. And she came on, and I started quite spontaneously singing along in the nail salon, which I, in normal circumstances, would not do. I would find it embarrassing. And so that formed part of the story to illustrate what the symptoms were. And the audience laughed, and the audience immediately knew who I was speaking of and knew the song I was singing. And but I don't know if an Anglophone audience would necessarily know who she was, or it wouldn't have the same cultural meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky, especially now that shows are online and the audiences are anywhere. You know, you never know what people know or don't know. And a lot of times, like, I would say maybe for storytellers who are in the US, for instance, they're such a big country that it's easy for them to assume that anything that they talk about that they've seen on TV when they were kids, or music they've listened to, or any kind of cultural reference, everyone knows what they're talking about. But now audiences are sort of everywhere, and so sometimes I have to tell storytellers, well, can you like be more specific, because some people will not know where that place is or what it means. And so if you can just add like 3 words to make it more to make it make sense for everyone.
Yeah, it's an important point, right? Because we live with our stories and our experiences, so we make assumptions about them holding commerce beyond ourselves. But I think I can think of a few stories I've told rather where if I cite something in the 1970s, so the Partridge Family and David Cassidy, or, you know, a cultural icon of the 1970s of my childhood, could be relatively meaningless to someone now. It would be the equivalent of citing the Backstreet Boys to someone who grew up in the 90s. And so I think those are important things to think about, not just for geography, but age also is another kind of boundary around experience, right? So that, especially if you're making cultural references, a younger audience or even an older audience might not know. So the challenge for the storyteller is to not just say what it is, but really get to what the impact of that thing is. Right, so that the audience will get it.
And I guess it's fine if not everyone understands everything, as long as there are enough details for them to grasp, like, the time, the generation or the time it was.
The general message, because often audiences don't, you know, as storytellers, I think sometimes we hang on to every detail as we're crafting a story because it's ours, and we're very attached to every little hook and nook and cranny of the story. But really the audience remembers what they feel. And that's what's important, right? They're listening, they're hearing your story and remembering something maybe that is concurrent in their own life. So it sometimes is less about your story and more about what they feel in response to it.
Yes, I love that, the fact that the audience is as much part of your story as you are, almost, or that's what you want to get across. So this year, 2020, is almost coming to a close. Thank God. And so storytelling shows have had to move online. So you've had to tell stories in front of your computer. You're going to do it again this Sunday on Bodies of Stories. How is that for you, that experience?
So I really love that question, because it's something I've thought about and learned. I learned something about this year that surprised me. Certainly, hearing and seeing the audience is exciting. In storytelling shows, we're often fairly close to the audience, and you can see their reactions and kind of feel their energy. And that's great. And I was concerned then that, well, how would this, transpose to me and the camera? And I found in the few times I've done it this year, there's this heightened intimacy. I can't figure it out. There's something really quiet about me and the camera, knowing that people are watching. And I've had friends in the audience who've said they feel closer to the story.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that people are at home and comfortable, and it's a safe space, but I think it opens up a really interesting channel. It also allows us to hear from storytellers, not just in our own city, but, outside. So I actually like it, and it doesn't come with all of the pre-show nervousness that one might have in front of a large audience.
Yeah.
And maybe for those people who are nervous about speaking in public, this is a great way to make storytelling more accessible for those people, because maybe, if you don't want to get up in front of the audience, maybe you'd be comfortable just, speaking to your camera at home.
I agree. And it's the same thing for producers, actually, because I am a producer behind my screen, and I don't know if I would have created my show in person. I created the show online in January, which was very weird to do back then. But so, because I think it's more comfortable for me, that's not why I created it online, but it's part of why I like it. I like being, or maybe I'm more comfortable just behind my screen, hosting and everything. And then I think also another aspect of it feeling more intimate is that we're actually on the same level as the audience. We're not, higher on a stage. We don't have more light in our face. We have just the same amount of light. And so it's more equal to equal. And it makes it feel like, anyone at any moment can say something, or which they won't, because it's still a show, but that it's stories, and anyone on the screen, can feel like themselves. They can do it as well. And then there's one last thing is that before this year, seeing someone on your screen and talking to them was mostly, for work, you have conference calls and stuff, but like mostly talking to a family member who's in another country, or a friend on Skype. And so it's like, and you're talking to them in like either this microphone or, but it's like being on the phone with a close one. So and you don't have to speak loud. You can just use your natural voice. So it's just,
there's an aspect, agreed, all of those things. And it was a really big awareness this year to learn this, to not view the screen as an impediment to sharing stories. And in fact, I think it democratizes storytelling. I think there's an aspect of storytelling sometimes in shows that can be that emphasizes performance over the story, and that I think keeps people from sharing their stories, because the assumption is that I have to be comfortable in front of a large mass of people.
Right.
Whereas this really, again, opens up this other channel. And I think the more stories we hear from more diverse storytellers, the better. But both in all senses of diversity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this conversation. Would you like to say last words?
I'm so looking forward to telling this story. This is a new story that I'm really happy to share with Bodies of Stories and the audience, and it's one that is just very, very close to my heart. It's about my mom and me, and I look forward to sharing it.
That's great. I can't wait for Sunday. The theme is DNA. Everyone can tune in at 1 p.m. I'll put the link down below. It's free. So it's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are in Europe, it's like early evening. And thank you so much, Johanne, for talking to me today. I'll see you on Sunday.
Thanks.
Bye.